So now it's time to add some bones or armatures. And before we do that, we save the file, Control S to save it. We can also come up here to File and Save. So it's good to save the scene time to time. So to add armatures or bones, I will zoom in a bit and select this O-ring. And when it is selected, I press Shift S and choose cursor to select it so that the 3D cursor is placed or positioned here in the center of the O-ring. So now I go to the front view by pressing 1 on the numpad, like so. And here I press Shift A, go to armature, so the bone will be placed here where the 3D cursor is. Now I have to rotate this bone. I press R, and when I rotate in the front view, I press R and rotate, I will rotate around the y-axis. So here I will rotate in this direction, and I type 90 on the numpad and hit enter. Then I grab this arrow. If you don't see this arrow, I will also press T to bring in this menu. I have move activated here. You can also come up here to select this arrow and click move, so the gizmo will be visible when you select an object. You can also use G and X to move the bone in X direction or along the X-axis. So I will move the bone to this position here. I drop it there, and when it is selected, I come over here to Object, Properties, go down here in the menu. We have Viewport Display. Here I check this box in front so that it will be easier to see this bone. Then I zoom in a bit. So when it is selected, I go to Edit Mode. I press Tab. You can also come up here to select Edit Mode. When we come in Edit Mode, this joint is now selected, and I will grab this arrow and drag it along the X-axis, and it will stop here at the bottom of the piston. Around here, like so. Then I will extrude another bone. So I press E on the keyboard, then extrude it along the X-axis, so I press X, and I will drop it here where the crosshead is. So now we are going to place this joint inside this crosshead where the hole is, in the center here. To do that, I press Tab to go back to Object Mode, then Shift select the crosshead when this bone or armature is selected. Shift left click the crosshead. When they are selected, I go to Local View, and you can do that by pressing the slash on the numpad, or go to View, Local View, toggle Local View. You see here numpad slash, so I'd use the numpad slash here, so it will be easier to handle these two. So now I deselect and select the crosshead, because now I want this joint to be placed here in the center. And to do that, I press Tab to go to Edit Mode when it comes to the crosshead. Make sure that I have Edge select, zoom in, then I press Alt and left click this edge here so that I will select a loop. Then I move the camera so that I can see here on the other side. Here I press Alt and Shift and then left click this edge so that I will select this loop. So now we see that the gizmo is placed here in the center. So when I now press Shift S and cursor to selection, the 3D cursor will be placed here in the center of the selection. So now when we have the 3D cursor here, I press Tab to go back to Object Mode, select this armature and press Tab to go to Edit Mode, and we see now that this joint is selected. So here I press Shift S and selection to cursor, so now we have it here in the center. So now when it is placed there in the center, I press numpad slash, go back to main view. Then I press 1 to go to front view, and here I will extrude another bone, press E, drag it up to this position and place it here. So now this joint will be positioned in the center of this connecting rod here where the hole is. So I press tab to go to object mode, shift select the connecting rod, press numpad slash, like so, and then I select the connecting rod, press tab to go to edit mode, make sure I'm in edge selection, and I will do the same here. I will Alt left click this edge here, so I will select the loop, then I will orbit the camera. Here, when I orbit the camera, the orbit center is far away, so here I press period on the numpad to zoom to selection. So now if I orbit the camera, I will orbit around that selection. So now it will be easier to find this side. Here I press Alt and Shift and left click this loop, and then press Shift S, cursor to selection. So now we have the 3D cursor here in the center of the hole. And then I press tab, go back to object mode, select this armature, and press tab to go to edit mode. When this joint is selected, I press Shift S, selection to cursor, and now we have positioned the joint in the center of the hole. Here, now I press numpad slash to go back to main view, and press 1 to go to front view, like so. So now we need another bone here to go to the center of the shaft. So I press E to extrude and Z to go to extrude it along the Z axis, and I drop the joint here, or the bone. Now we have to place this joint in the center of the shaft. So I press tab to go to object mode, select the shaft, press Shift S, cursor to selection. So now we have the cursor in the center of the shaft. But in this case we will not do as we did before. I select this armature, the bone, press tab to go to edit mode. So now we see that this joint is selected, and I zoom in a bit, like so. I grab this 2D handle, left click and hold, and drag the gizmo, the center of the gizmo, so that the 3D cursor will be placed inside the ring of the gizmo, like so. So now we have this joint of the bone here in the center, and eventually this bone will be the master when it comes to the animation later on. So we have to separate this bone from this armature. To do that, we have to press Alt and then press P, Alt P, to clear parent, so that this bone will not be parented to this armature or to this bone. Then I press P to separate bones. So now when I press tab to go back to object mode and I select this bone, now it is a separate armature. So if we come over here to the outliner and go to the bottom of the outliner, we see that we have two armatures. The first one and now the second one. So here I select the first one here, double click the name, and I will type _1, armature 1. Then I double click this one, the last one, remove some text, and then _master. And then we have to make some adjustments, because when this armature is selected, or this bone is selected, we see that the origin is placed here at the bottom of the first bone. So I have to move this origin to the center of this joint here. So here, when it is selected, I right click, set origin to 3D cursor, because it is in the center here. So now I can rotate. I press R, and we are still in the front view, so I can, when I rotate now, I rotate around the Y axis. So now it is it rotates around the center here of the shaft. Next step is to connect these two so that this armature will follow this armature. And to do that we have to use inverse kinematics. So I select this armature, press Tab, and then we are in edit mode, but we have to go to pose mode to add inverse kinematics. So I click here, pose mode, and we see that this bone turns now into cyan color. That means it is selected. So when it is selected, we come over here to properties, and we select the bone constraint properties. Click this menu, and here we select inverse kinematics. So now we see that this bone turns to orange. That means that inverse kinematics is now connected to this bone. And now we have to connect the IK to another bone. So we come over here to the properties, we see target, we select eyedropper, and we select this armature master. That will be the target. And the bone, well, there is only one bone in armature master, so we select that bone here. And now this bone turns to yellow. That means now the inverse kinematics is now connected to this target. So now I go back to object mode, select this bone. I zoom out of it to show how it will work. You can also test yourself, test out your connection here. I press R and Y because I want to rotate it around the Y axis, and we see that the first armature tries to follow the bottom joint of the bone, but it is too stiff to follow, so I have to make some changes to this armature. And this bone will be a stretcher, so when this armature is selected, I go to pose mode, then select this bone here. When it is selected, I come over here to bone properties. Down here we have inverse kinematics. If you don't see the settings, you just expand this menu here, inverse kinematics. Here we have IK stretch. So we have to make this bone to a stretcher. So we left click and drag to the right so that it will be 100% stretch. And now if I go back to object mode and select this master, press R and Y to rotate around the Y axis, we see now that the first bone will stretch, but it still not work because we have to make some additional changes. I press escape, select this armature, go back to pose mode. So this bone is now selected. We have to lock it in Z direction, so it will only go along the x-axis. Same goes with this bone. Select it so it will turn into cyan color. Lock it in Z direction. So now if I come up here to go to object mode, select the master, press R and Y, we see it now, it will work. So this is how you do it. So now we have connected these armatures together. So the next step is to connect the parts to the bones so the engine will move. But before we do that, I will save the scene, Ctrl S, and then we will continue in the next video.